One of the things I saw firsthand is his willingness to speak Spanish, even though his Spanish wasn't perfect. In fact, the media would ask me about, oh, he speaks Spanish. Now, of course, I wouldn't embarrass him with it, but candidly, he doesn't speak Spanish, but he tried.
Put that coffee down.
Creators are leaders. Be careful what kind of leaders you're producing here.
Helen, we're both in sales. Let me tell you why I suck as a salesman.
They realized that to be in power, you didn't need guns or money or even numbers. You just needed the will to do what the other guy wouldn't.
I'm not leaving. The show goes on.
Hey there, friend. This podcast, we talk about leadership, personal productivity, time management, and the craft of selling in the construction industry. Now, before I jump in and introduce our guest today, I want to give just a little bit of context. I majored in Spanish and I lived in Mexico, and we help clients, many of which we help both on the sales side as well as the communications side with the Hispanic demographic, whether they employ them or they sell to them. And of course, we have some folks that don't care about it at all, and it never comes up. And that's where sometimes the confusion arises. Say, what the hell? You speak Spanish? I'll say, yeah, absolutamente sí. Todos los pelirrojos hablan español casi perfectamente. All gingers speak Spanish almost perfectly. Actually, that's a lie. However, the point is occasionally we will talk to folks that really resonate with certain subset of our customer base and others that do not. And in this case, we have an individual that would truly resonate with both, because many of you listening, you either employ or sell to the Hispanic demographic, or your customers employ or sell to Hispanics. So this is really about understanding cultures and influence and persuasion. So we're talking to an expert who can speak directly to that, and he's a fascinating guy. So wanted to set the stage for that to give you just a little bit of context if you didn't already know, so we can dive ahead together. Now, nearly a decade ago, I ran into our guest here today. His name is Jacob Monty, Esquire. That's right. He's a lawyer. He's a barrister, but wait, do not turn this off just yet. Jacob Monty is a founding member of Monty and Ramirez LLP. They're a law firm focused on the representation of public and private sector employers in matters involving employment, labor, and immigration compliance issues. Monty and Ramirez is headquartered in Houston, Texas, but they practice all over the country. Now, as you will hear today, Jacob Monty is always very generous with his time and with his insights as we talk about what you can do to make sure you are recruiting, retaining, and working with the Hispanic demographic as intelligently as possible. Now, Jake is a really interesting perspective. He has worked with presidents of the United States of America. We do get into some very tactical elements about recruiting and retaining Hispanics in ways that I promise you probably have not thought about using before. I was stunned at one of these ways that Jake mentioned to recruit and connect and build trust with the Hispanic demographic that I'm sure will catch your attention. We covered two very common scenarios, one of which is the easiest way to get on ICE's radar. And sidestepping the political landscape, we talk about the economic factors that are facing the construction industry when it comes to the importance of the Hispanic demographic and how we can find a rational middle to move forward and work together more effectively. And over the years, Jake has been very successful in growing his business in a number of different industries, but specifically the construction industry. And we talk about his goal-setting practice that has enabled him to do just that. So as always, thank you for your time and attention. Please enjoy my conversation with Mr. Jacob Monty. So, Mr. Jacob Monty, Esquire, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here, Bradley.
I know you're busy. You were one of the first people ever in the state of Texas who started saying, Bradley, you got to find your way down here. And I didn't make it quite far as south as Houston, but I made it to the state, couldn't be happier. So you were one of the first guys that I met down here. So you always have a special place in my heart, and I appreciate you making time for this today.
I'm sure you enjoy not paying Illinois income tax and not having to shovel snow. So welcome to Texas.
2 for 2, my friend. That is correct. So your most recent book, now I know of 3 for sure. How many books have you written?
It's 3.
It is 3. Okay. All right. I'm up to speed. Most recent is Sons of Wetbacks. And with a title like that, it's one you got to dig into just a little bit, but really talking about, I believe, and let you fill in the blanks, your father, their involvement in World War II. Give us a little more context of what that book is about and what caused you to write it.
Well, great. It's the story of my 5 great uncles on my mom's side, who all served in World War II and were the sons, all 5 of them were the sons of wetbacks, people that crossed over without permission and settled in the U.S. And I use the term wetback. It's certainly an offensive term. I don't want to say that it's not, but I actually think the term wetback is less offensive than the term illegal. I think illegal implies that they committed a heinous crime, when in fact, most of the undocumented in the country committed the misdemeanor of crossing the border without inspection and are working. But most of them aren't hardened criminals. Most of them aren't murderers, but they did not follow the rules. And that's my history. Yeah. The interesting thing is, even though their parents weren't born in the country, even though their parents didn't have permission to live in the country, because all 5 sons were born in the U.S., they became citizens. And my grandmother was their sister. She became a citizen by virtue of being born here. And they all assimilated and became American and loved this country. And I wanted to use that story to tell my history of how we became American and share that with people, especially now that immigration has gotten to be a controversial topic.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe let's go into that just a little bit here. If it's possible, I think it is. We're relatively intelligent people here. I think we can try. And I think many of our listeners understand, specifically in the construction industry, how important Hispanic labor is to getting the work done, let alone quality standards and everything there. But if we can divorce ourselves from the politics just a little bit, this is a huge economic issue. Stan Merrick, who I follow very closely, they're a client of ours, and he has been just a great leader in terms of, I think, folks that are his age, that are generally a little bit older, they're business owners, they're white, native language is English, and he's really pushing this idea of, hey, let's find a rational middle. Let's find a way that we can come together and say, is it important for the country? It is. But specific to our industry, it is absolutely critical. There's some common sense steps or things that you cite often to say, hey, I think this is some common ground that can get some momentum going on this issue.
Well, I think we got to start with the notion that certainly bad, hardened criminals have to go back. And they are certainly a menace to the entire country and even to the immigrant community themselves. So you take those folks off the table. And I think the other thing you look at is our industry needs more workers. We have a huge shortage of carpenters, of carpet layers, of cement masons, of air conditioning and electrician workers. And how do we fill those needs? Immigration is the solution. And of course, there has to be a measured way of doing that. No one's talking about open borders. There has to be a system whereby we let additional workers into the country. But uniting, President Bush used to say, it's simple. We have to unite a willing employer with a willing worker. Sounds simple. To date, we haven't been able to do it, but I am hopeful that we're going to get there. But it's going to take rational people coming together and talking about this in a way that doesn't alienate folks. And you're going to have to spend some time because you can't fit it on the back of a bumper sticker, right?
Yeah. And that's, for better or worse these days, a lot of times when social media gets involved, right? What gets lost is a lot of the nuance and the stuff that says, hey, look, we're going to have to sit with this for a bit and dig into the details and peel back a few of the layers and get beyond a soundbite. You mentioned George W. Bush. You have worked now directly with 2 presidents. And tell me, what have you learned from collaborating with them?
Well, I've worked with George W. Bush when he was governor of Texas. And then I got to work with him when he was president, and I served in his administration, and I saw him up close and personal. And one of the things I saw firsthand is his willingness to to speak Spanish, even though his Spanish wasn't perfect. In fact, the media would ask me about, oh, he speaks Spanish. Of course, I wouldn't embarrass him with it, but candidly, he doesn't speak Spanish, but he tried. And the press gave him credit for it. The people, me included, who were with him, appreciated his effort, and he used it effectively. I will say, I know he doesn't speak it, beyond a few words, but those few words, as you say, and good to excellent, if you can get over the fact that you're not going to be perfect, and if you put yourself out there and you're vulnerable, people are going to appreciate it. And they did so with George W. Bush, and he used it effectively, and it made him a great communicator. And to date, no Republican has gotten a higher share of the Hispanic vote than George W. Bush. I mean, he got 45% of the Latino vote in 2004. No Republican has come even close. So I think it pays dividends. And that's what I like about your book is you give out recommendations that aren't just altruistic or things to do because it's the right thing to do, but it's also going to help your business. It's going to help you recruit better. In Bush's case, he did it because he cared, but it also helped him get votes, which is good too, right?
Yeah, obviously, if we can handle the morals and the ethical angle of it, that's fantastic. If we're not addressing a little bit of the enlightened self-interest, it's going to be hard to change behaviors. But I think you bring up a great point, and that I think Reagan got a lot of credit for this as well, where he would occasionally, as president, talk about things that people close to him or even the observant voter would say, I don't think he has any real context of what this is. Well, if you think of all the issues, that doesn't mean you can't be a good communicator. And I think in the role of president, that you really have to do that, and picking your spots, knowing there's a little bit of risk, but also not being afraid of that. And yeah, George W. Bush did a great job, but I still have several of those clips I will use in different presentations. And it's just to say is, hey, meet them halfway. People are going to appreciate the effort. If we transition to something a little bit more tactical for clients of ours, there's two specific situations that come up often. And this is where, quite frankly, I have referred clients to your website. I've gone there myself to try to find tools and resources. So I'm wondering if maybe, Jake, I can run these couple of things by you and you can kind of give some kind of candid responses about here are some steps that you can take if they do arise. The first is what I think I threw out like 50 words in a row, and you did it much better. You said the new confessed identity scenario, where you have an employee, let's call him Juan. He's been working for you for a while. Then someday he shows up and he says, actually, I'm Carlos. Here's my certification. Here's my paperwork that proves I'm Carlos. If I am a GC or a sub, and this happens to me, other than taking a deep breath, taking a step back, what are the next steps that we should do in that situation?
Well, this has happened millions of times to employers, and it happened a lot after DACA became popular.
Right.
And you had these dreamers that would come in and they would say, boss, I'm not Jose Luis. My real name is Federico Garcia. Here's my new work authority document issued by the federal government. Mm-hmm. And what do I do? And we call it new confessed identity scenario because they're coming forward with their new identity and they're confessing it to you. Solving this is pretty easy. You can, as the employer, terminate him for lying to you, but most employers don't want to do that because he's been a great employee and now he has legal status that he didn't have previously. So we recommend that you ask him how he adjusted his status. He has to give you some explanation. So, okay, tell me what happened. Oh, I got DACA, or oh, I got a waiver granted in Ciudad Juarez or in San Salvador. He has to explain how he regularized his status.
Okay.
And then at that point, you may want to do some due diligence. Have a lawyer look at the document, maybe do a background check to make sure it's good. There's so many fake documents out there. So telling if this is a good document or not is not easy, but do some due diligence, make sure that it is good. And then here's the easy part. You got to complete a new I-9.
Okay.
And you have to save the old I-9 with the new I-9. And that's the tough part, because from his point of view, he would rather you just throw away the old I-9 that has information containing the fake documents he used.
Sure.
But from the company's point of view, we can't throw away that old I-9 because we need it to show that we initially complied with the law and we were fooled by his fake document. But if you have him complete a new I-9 and save the old I-9 with the new I-9, the company is going to be in good shape and you're going to be able to continue to employ this person. And yeah, there's some other questions. I mean, what about seniority? Do you use the old date or the new date?
You shared a story, but someone calls in who's not part of your organization and says, hey there, it appears that someone in your organization has been using my either name or social security number. Can you give us a little bit of context about that and what you should do in that scenario?
Yes, and this is probably the single biggest thing you as an employer can do to avoid getting on ICE's radar screen.
Okay.
And it's called the innocent bystander scenario. And the case that I'm thinking about happened in Corpus Christi, where a company was contacted by an innocent bystander. And this lady called the employer about 18 times. She spoke to different people, and her complaint was always the same. I live in Scranton, Pennsylvania. I've never worked for your company. I'm getting kicked out of my government housing project because they say I earn too much money, and please help me. The company ignored her. Different people ignored her. Finally, when she's facing eviction, she goes to her pastor. Her pastor refers her to the congressman. The congressman gets ICE involved. My client ended up with a full-blown ICE investigation, all because we didn't call this lady back. And had we called her back, solving the problem would have been easy. What do? Okay, you take her information. You find out if that employee still works for your company. If so, you got to interview the employee. If he still works there, you have to ask him, is this your number? If he says no, you can't use that number for him anymore.
Right.
If he doesn't have a new valid document, you are going to have to terminate him. But terminating one employee is a lot better than we ended up terminating about 60 employees. And it was all avoidable had the company been proactive and addressed this innocent bystander. I understand what it is to have your identity stolen. And I just wish that the company would have been more proactive. So if you have a situation like that, it's low-hanging fruit that enables you to solve the issue for the innocent bystander and also take you off the radar screen of ICE. Because right now, most ICE investigations happen when individuals call the ICE hotline because they are the victim of a crime committed by an undocumented.
Okay.
The most commonly committed crime by undocumented, unfortunately, is ID theft. In this case, it was inadvertent because the individual bought the document not knowing that the social belonged to this lady in Scranton.
Yeah.
But it was ID theft nonetheless.
I've got your book here, the first book that I got, which is Hispanics in the Workplace. When it comes to recruiting, retaining workers, that is something that we are constantly working with our clients on when it comes to the Hispanic workforce, whether that's in English or in Spanish, online or off. Is there anything that you'd say, this is something, maybe it's a tactic that people know about, but it's not used enough, or maybe it's somewhat of an unknown tactic that you recommend more do, but any sort of insights along those lines to help any listeners who are looking to recruit and retain more Hispanic workers?
Well, you've talked about them in your books a lot. Nepotism is a great recruiting strategy.
It is.
It has some downsides because if you fire one of the Lopez, you could end up having to fire all of them.
Yes, it's true.
But the employers I've been impressed with have been great communicators with their Hispanic community, and they're doing stuff with churches. They're doing recruiting events with churches. The evangelical churches are growing by leaps and bounds in the Latino community, and they're savvy enough to realize that, and they're partnering with different pastors, and they're doing job fairs at the church, and that has been the most effective recruiting strategy that I've seen.
Okay.
I've also seen some employers go to Latino nightclubs and hand out flyers there. And I also helped one employer do a job fair at a Latino nightclub. But again, it's all about knowing the workforce and then communicating with them. You're not going to be able to just call Monster or Indeed. You're going to have to put some thought into it and become a better communicator, and maybe use a mode of communication that you wouldn't typically do, like a job fair at an evangelical church.
We gotta pause here, Jake. When you start talking about doing a job fair at a Latino nightclub, I have, number one, I'm in. I want to be part of this. I think I can help. Number two, where did this come from? Where did you first hear of this? When did this first come on your radar? When you mentioned this, I did a double take, and I appreciate your professionalism. You acted like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Go to the university, go to the church, go to the Latino nightclub. Let me continue on. Go into this just a little bit more. This is fascinating to me.
Well, it's weird. In the Midwest, recruiting at Latino nightclubs has been very common for the meat industry.
Okay.
And that's where I got a lot of my experience with Latino workforces, was in Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas.
Meat packaging plants?
Meat packing plants.
Yeah.
When Tyson wanted to steal the employees from their competitor, where did they go? They would go out and recruit at Latino nightclubs, put flyers in all of the cars as they were parked there, or pay someone to do that.
Yeah.
And then word spread that Tyson was paying $1 more than where they were working. So people moved. So I've seen the nightclub used as a vehicle for recruiting in the meat industry. And I recently saw it used effectively in Dallas in the construction industry. Another thing that I've seen used well has been the recruiting bonus, where you offer a recruiting fee to your current employees. The other thing, when DACA came out, we had some employers that offered to pay for the DACA fee, $465 in government fees, or even the attorney's fees. That's something that will work as an incentive to get DACA people. I mean, DACA people are really a priority because they're documented.
Right.
They can get driver's licenses. They're younger folks.
Right.
So is it worth the premium? Yeah. I mean, if you could cull and get just DACA, I mean, boy, any employer would love to have DACAs because they have permission to work in the U.S. They can get driver's licenses. So anything around DACA is going to be a way to get the cream of the crop, so to speak. But again, the best employers are going to be creative. They're not going to just think, well, I'm going to hire Indeed or Monster. The leaders in the industry are thinking outside the box, and they're good communicators. It really comes down to that, being a good communicator.
Is there anything that comes to mind online that you'd say, hey, this is a tactic that you might want to look into or has worked in other places?
Well, one thing I will say is all of your Hispanic employees are talking bad about you or good about you on WhatsApp. And you ought to just know it right now and embrace it. WhatsApp is so popular with the Latino worker. And there's little chats that happen where people get to communicate on WhatsApp, and they're long little chats. Okay. So every workforce that I've been to has the sub WhatsApp chat going on where they talk about a birthday party or a boss who's a jerk, but it's happening there. So might as well embrace that WhatsApp channel that your workplace already has. And why not post, hey, we need a driver? Why not post it on that WhatsApp channel? Because they are communicating on WhatsApp. I know this because I've spent 25 years working with Latino workforces. And when I'm investigating a matter, the first place I'll go to is find out what's happening on WhatsApp.
Okay.
Because it's like what Messenger was 20 years ago.
Yeah. And is the popularity driven by its ability to be text driven and free through international communication?
Oh, yeah. It's weird, Bradley. When I first started helping employers with Hispanic workforces, everyone was using prepaid telephone calls,
right, yeah,
or cards. And it was expensive to communicate with your loved ones in Mexico. Now, via WhatsApp, it's free.
Yeah.
So you can send video, you can send short messages. So I think HR departments have to embrace WhatsApp. They have to embrace Facebook, of course, talking to pastors. Again, I'm Catholic, so I can talk bad about Catholics. I love Catholics, but they'll maybe let you buy an ad in their bulletin. An evangelical pastor will let you actually address the community about a job opening. He'll let you go up and address the group. That's a lot better than just putting a passive ad in a bulletin. Ads are good too, but talking to pastors, I think this type of guerrilla marketing has to be adopted when you're looking for employees.
Well, hey, I appreciate you making time, Jake. This has been great. Over the years, you have been extremely helpful in your writing and obviously in your law practice to myself, as well as several of our clients. I want to make sure before you go, where can people learn more about you and Monty and Ramirez LLP?
Well, great. Thank you, Bradley. We're at MontyRamirezLaw.com.
Okay.
And we help employers all over the country in labor and immigration matters. And we specialize with employers that have large Hispanic workforces or that have issues relating to Hispanic workforces. Again, we help employers all over the country, and we're passionate about representing employers in these areas of law that can be complex.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to link to that in our show notes as well at constructionleadershippodcast.com. So as always, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you joining me.
Thank you, Bradley.
As always, my friend, thank you for listening. I hope you found my conversation with Jacob Monty, Esquire, to be worth your time and attention. We're going to get you out of here. You're going to get on with the rest of your day. We're going to close it out like we always do. You, my friend, you are owed nothing. Deliver value first.